Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you yet again another favorite villains video segment right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly, as always, here to bring you the latest in this week's favorite villain video segment. And if you guys have seen my favorite heroes video, then you know that this week my favorite villain is dedicated to the X-Men series. This request coming courtesy of Afro Ninja 0077, and also by all of you guys. You voted for it. The X-Men series pulled an upset over the Kingdom Hearts series this past week, pulling in 22 votes to Kingdom Hearts 17. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into this video. Now, my favorite hero video was dedicated to my man, the Wolverine. All-time favorite X-Men hero, and actually, he's my absolute favorite Marvel character. I didn't even mention that in that video. But with that said, this video is going to be dedicated to my favorite X-Men villain, and he is definitely one of my favorite Marvel characters also. Now, whether or not you want to say, oh, Larry, that's so cliche, you couldn't pick anyone else. Look, it's called favorite hero, favorite villain for a reason. My favorite, and those who agree with me, our favorite. And my favorite X-Men villain, hands down, out of all the pantheon of X-Men villains, he gets the number one. That is my man, Mr. Erik Lensher, a.k.a. Magnus, a.k.a. known to the world throughout the entire Marvel Universe and the comic book industry as Magneto. And Magneto, he is, for all intents and purposes, the quintessential X-Men nemesis. He is the definitive X-Men villain. But why is he my favorite? We'll get into that later on in this vid. But first off, I want to give just a brief synopsis for all of you who do not know about this character's history. Magneto was born, well, disclaimer, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the origin story, the most common origin story, because once again, this character has a general consensus, a general origin story, but there have been multiple spins on it throughout the years. So I'm going to go with the version that the general public, that most of us know of. That is that Magneto was born Erik Lensher in, I believe he was born in Poland, but he was born a Jew, and he was a young man during the German occupation, during World War II, during the Nazi and the Nazi occupation, the Jewish concentration camps. In fact, he and his family were both in a Jewish concentration camp, and it's within that camp, two things happen in this young man's life. Three things actually. Number one, his family was killed. Both his mother and father were killed. Number two, he discovered that he had the ability to control, I believe the way his power was initially explained is that he can control the magnetic field surrounding metal objects. But also, and most importantly, it's within his time within the Jewish concentration camps that he discovered the most brutal, the most disgusting, and the peak of humanity's decadence, the peak of mankind's hatred, horror, and mankind's destruction. It is within his time in that concentration camp that he saw humanity at its utmost ugliest. What Hitler and the Nazis did in World War II, I don't think anyone would deny unless you're a anti-Semitic fuck. I don't think you would deny the fact that though that was some of the darkest in humanity's history, darkest times, what they did was unforgivable. And Erik Lensher, he took what he saw, he took that to heart, and that began to mold his entire perspective of mankind and of the Homo sapien species. You know, Magneto, well, Erik, before he became Magneto, what wound up happening later on in his life, after he survived the concentration camps after the end of World War II, he met a young man named Charles Xavier, known to the world as Professor X, and they were friends. They did have a friendship, but most importantly, they had a common camaraderie because they both wanted to see to the advancement of mutant kind. The well-being and the advancement of mutant kind. They were, for all intents and purposes, the NAACP for mutants. That's what they were. And they begun the school that would become the Xavier Institute. And for years, they worked together to begin what would be, for all intents and purposes, the mutant civil rights movement. But they also had their differences, and it was only a matter of time before those differences compiled up, and it eventually led to their big split up. And that's where the factions began building, and that's where the line in the sand was drawn, because you had Erik, who would later become Magneto, and he would foster the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And on the other side you had Charles Xavier, Professor X, and he would find, you know, he would be the founder of the Xavier Institute and the X-Men. And so throughout these characters' publication history, you know, they would meet each other back and forth, you know, numerous battles, numerous fights, and so on and so forth. But the thing about Magneto, one thing about Magneto that I do have to comment on, Magneto is a character that, believe it or not, has seen multiple changes in his personality and in his, I guess you can say, his motives and his means. Magneto's goal has remained the same throughout his entire publication history, and that is to make mutants the dominant species on Earth. That's always been his overall goal. But the way in which he's done so has changed a lot, because we've seen Magneto as a hero. Yes, Magneto has actually been a hero at a time. We've seen him as a hero, as an anti-hero, and as a villain. We've seen him as a monarch, I guess you can say he always was a monarch with the island of Genosha. We've seen him as kind of an aristocrat type character with the House of M series, you know. Of course, with the Brotherhood, he's always been that leader. But you know, there have been stories where Magneto has been able to rally an army, and you know that was adapted into the third X-Men live action film, X-Men 3: The Last Stand, when we saw Magneto brilliantly portrayed by Sir Ian McKellen, excuse me. But he had, you know, an army at his disposal. Magneto in the comics, I will say this. While I enjoyed Sir Ian McKellen's portrayal of Magneto, I thought it was spot on. Me personally, I didn't think they could find a better actor to portray him. But if you saw the X-Men live action films and you liked Magneto in the films, that's only a fraction of this character in the comics. Because like I say, in the comics, man, he's been able to do unbelievable shit. You know, that just like I commented in my Wolverine video, he's going toe-to-toe with some of the biggest and baddest in the Marvel Universe. And yeah, he's gotten his ass kicked a few times, but he's also come on top a lot. And that's a testament to this character. Magneto, well, even with Magneto's introduction into the series, it's always been understood that he is amongst the most powerful mutants on Earth. He is within, in the animated series and in the film, they call him a level 5 mutant, which is like the highest of their rating of mutant powers. But what I'm saying is, yes, he is in the top class of powerful mutants. So he has the power, number one. He's excruciatingly intelligent. Magneto is highly intelligent, okay? But I think the thing that makes Magneto such a devastating adversary, the thing that where his power truly lies, and this is the thing that I love most about this character, he can speak to the masses. He can rally forces like a god. Okay? Like I said, you know, there are times where Magneto's been able to lead an army. But the reason why I keep bringing that up in this video is because unless you've read those comics, you think, I'm not talking about just a handful of fucking mutants. I am talking about legions of mutants that he's been able to rally. Okay? Shit, I really wish I can remember the number that it was. I believe this was an issue of Astonishing X-Men, and I believe it was one that came out in the early 2000s, and it was the issue that inspired the third X-Men movie. But there was a scene where Magneto was kind of like in this wilderness area, and he's standing on top of this cliff over this large spread of water. I believe it was at a lake. And it was like a little cliff. You know, it wasn't huge. It was just a little cliff. But he's standing on top, and actually he's talking to Scarlet Witch. And he has his helmet under his arm. And he's telling her to, like, you know, unleash the first assault or whatever, right? And we see this scene where he's turning and he's putting his helmet on. And, you know, he's putting his helmet on, and it's a clip of him with the helmet on. The cape is flying behind him, and there's a close-up of Scarlet Witch. We see, you know, Magneto walking away from her, but in front of him is a fucking mass of mutants. And when I saw that, I was like, holy shit. That is why I like Magneto. Also, like when I mentioned earlier, you know, his attitude and his ideal of mankind, you know, yes, it's highly cynical. But see, Magneto is one of those characters. I mentioned this last week in my favorite villains video for Lucifer last week, where I said that Lucifer was he was the type of villain where he wasn't just evil for the sake of being evil. Him quote unquote being evil is all a matter of perspective. He is a justified villain. He's the type of villain that the things he do are for legitimate reasons, and depending on the reason, you could actually agree with that character. Magneto is another classic example of that. Say what you will about his means in which he accomplishes his goals, but Magneto, for the most part, is a justified villain. I don't know how many times I've seen, I've read a comic or seen Magneto on screen and completely agreed with him in the justification of his actions. Honestly, Magneto is the type of character where I do agree with. A lot of times, 9 times out of 10, I agree with Magneto and I take his side a lot. And that's because of all the reasons I mentioned earlier. You know, I don't want to dwell too much into this whole topic of my cynical view towards humanity. But let's just say that there are a few things that Magneto says that I wholeheartedly agree with in his attitude towards humans, in the way they treat each other, their prejudice, discrimination. Take it from a minority, you know. I've experienced racism firsthand, so I know wholeheartedly mankind's capability for that type of hatred and that type of malice towards another human being, okay? Which is another, you know, that's another testament to the X-Men series. Another thing, you know, another reason why the X-Men series has been so successful is because the X-Men series was the type of series that played well into the mind and into the mindset and into the perspective of minorities. You know, X-Men is a series where no matter what, you can relate to these characters. If you're a minority, you can relate to them. If you were a nerd growing up, you could relate to them. If you were obese, if you were gay, if you were a foreigner, you know, no matter what, if you ever felt like you were different than the society around you, you could relate to the X-Men. I can't stress that enough. And those stories, they deal with all that type of shit. And like I said, Magneto is another clear example. He is another clear-cut, classic example of a popular character and a powerful character that series has been able to create. Because shit, what else can I say, really? What else can be said about this character? Literally, it's not just that I'm tongue-tied, but I just literally got to a loss of words, because the more I think about it, there are words that don't justify the significance of this character, okay? Yeah, I just had a nerdgasm just now. That just happened, okay? But you know what? With that said, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to wrap this video up. I think I've said what I had to say about this character. I think I did him justice in this video. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to wrap up this vid. I want to thank you all for joining me once again for another favorite villains video segment. And like always, be sure, comment, vote. Thumb up the series you want to see me take on next. And with that said, stay tuned for my anime favorites for the month of August, where I will be doing a full series review of my second favorite anime and manga series of all time, and that is Yu Yu Hakusho. But with that said, this is Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, signing off, and I'll catch you cats later. Peace.